Good afternoon, and welcome to my weekly update from our nation's capital. And it's been a pretty wild week. Let's start with what's, I think, top of mind for most Americans today, the war in Iran. We are 111 days into this war. The president, I guess, signed a memorandum of understanding with the Iranians yesterday in Paris, although the irony of signing it at Versailles, which has been the place of many awful treaties on a historic basis, awful to America, awful in terms of the end of World War I, in terms of causing other challenges with World War II. I mean, you couldn't make a more historic blunder. So where are we 111 days after this war of choice? The thing we absolutely know is that America is not better off. Our people's not better off. Our economy's not better off. Iran took on both the United States and Israel and at least played them to a tie. And we will be paying the price for this, unfortunately, I think, for a long time to come. So what's in the memorandum? Well, it says that Iran won't develop a nuclear weapon. That has been the Iranian government's position for the last 15 to 20 years. There's nothing new there. The agreement mentions nothing about Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. One of the things Trump said at the outset, we've got to get rid of their ballistic missile capabilities. Well, we now know they've got about 60% of the missiles left, 50% of their launchers. And we have actually used up so many of our missile interceptors, we and Israel, that Iran could continue to dribble these missiles out and make our bases vulnerable. We've not taken away that capacity, and then this agreement doesn't even mention missiles. It mentions the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the Strait of Hormuz was open before the war took place. And this agreement says Iran won't mess for maybe 60 days, but what then? We went into this war as well. Trump said we got to stop the Iranian proxies in the region. Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen. This agreement doesn't even mention the proxies. What it does do, though, is it immediately lifts sanctions on some of the Iranian oil, which means that tens of billions of dollars will go to the Iranian regime. The regime, by the way, which is more radical than the regime before the war. We killed the supreme leader, but we've got his son, and his son, since we killed his dad, his wife, and his kid, this guy is more radical, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has more control than they had before the war. That is not good. And on the proxies, there is an effort here that Iran is going to get $300 billion. $300 billion. How much of that will end up in the hands of the Houthis or some of the Iranian-backed militia groups who are in Iraq and elsewhere? We still have bases. How many Americans will be attacked because of this flow of resources to the Iranian regime? And then on the issue that was the driving force, we got to make sure Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. Well, they're going to talk about that for 60 days. And if anyone thinks that the Iranians are going to make a better deal with Donald Trump than they made with Barack Obama with a challenging deal called the JCPOA 12 years ago, I hope I'm wrong. But at least when we had the Obama deal, we had eyes on their nuclear capabilities. And it was not just us, it was us, the Europeans, the Russians, and the Chinese who were on the non-Iranian side. Now Russia and China are backers of Iran. So, again, I've always been amazed at Donald Trump's ability to sell stuff. But except for the most sycophantic toadies, this will go down as I believe, a disaster. And again, not my words, some of my Republican Senate friends. And the irony as well, and I think about, we've got a large Iranian diaspora, particularly in Northern Virginia. And those communities so wanted to see a regime change. And literally the Iranian people rose up in January, and more than 30,000 were brutally murdered by the regime. One of the things this deal also does is says the United States is not going to mess with Iran going forward. So the idea that the president said in January, we're going to rise up, people of Iran will be there to help you, in this memorandum, he basically says, America, hands off, Iranian regime, do whatever you want to your population. What does that make us look like around the rest of the world? What does that make us look like with our Gulf allies? We hope gas prices will come down, but that's on oil-based gas. But natural gas, we've got a lot of the facilities in the region that are permanently damaged. Fertilizer costs for the growing season in Virginia are already up 40% because of this war of choice. So it will be interesting to see how the public reacts. And the fact that the Trump administration leaked this to the press before they gave a version to Congress is, again, outrageous. So that is the war, and I'm happy to answer any questions. On the second issue, again, an area that was my direct responsibility around intelligence, I didn't think that President Trump could still surprise me. Well, close to 2 weeks ago, he suggested for the Director of National Intelligence, Bill Pulte, someone who is a third generation from a wealthy family that knows about mortgages. Bill Pulte is the head of our mortgage regulatory agencies and Fannie and Freddie. Bill Pulte has no national security experience. And the law says to be Director of National Intelligence, you got to have national security experience. Bill Pulte's one claim to fame is he was willing to take private information about mortgages and try to weaponize that against Trump's enemies. Thank goodness the courts pushed back. But the idea of that kind of irresponsible behavior would be now rewarded with having oversight on the 18 intelligence agencies that make up our intelligence community is a national security risk. And what the remarkable thing, again, just to finish out the story, is that I think the president realized last week he'd made a mistake, so he put forward another individual, Jay Clayton, who had national security experience. I know Mr. Clayton. I had tough questions for him. But yesterday, the president pulled Mr. Clayton's nomination for we don't know how long because the United States Senate was actually going to confirm him because there had been such bipartisan pushback against Mr. Pulte. So Donald Trump is now playing with our national security as a political pawn. There is a key intelligence tool that we need called Section 702 of the FISA law. That has expired. Donald Trump is saying he won't even renew that until he also somehow gets the SAVE Act, which is a voter disenfranchisement bill that has been voted down repeatedly. So I don't think this president gives a damn about Americans' national security. The only good news there is that even though technically the authority around FISA has expired, the communication companies are still cooperating with the government. So we do not have, at least to date, in the last 5 or 6 days, a going dark problem in terms of using this tool. But the fact that we were working on a bipartisan way to get this done, and then Trump throws this live hand grenade in, it is it's beyond belief. And many of the issues up here we talk about Democrats versus Republicans. This is not a case. This is reasonable people in both parties know we've got to maintain the integrity of our intelligence. We know they got to maintain these intelligence tools. The reason we have even this problem is because Donald Trump has thrown this political hand grenade into this process, and Americans are less safe because of it. On at least one cheery note, we are actually moving later today on a bill called Road to Housing. We're about 5.5 to 6 million housing units short in America. And we know housing prices are going up dramatically all across Virginia. Matter of fact, the average age of a first-time home buyer is now 41. That's outrageous. This is a series of small bills packaged together in what's called, again, the Road to Housing that will make it easier for localities to build new housing, try to decrease some of the undue regulations, give incentives for more housing, actually allow, for example, more what's called modular housing. I know older people think modular housing is trailer parks. No, there is a whole ability to build, construct most of the house off-site and then bring it in, for smaller houses, cheaper houses. It's not going to solve the whole housing crunch, but it is finally an example of a bipartisan willingness to take a series of ideas that can jumpstart housing supply, because we got plenty of housing demand. We need more supply. And this legislation that I've got bills included in the Road to Housing package, I think is a step in the right direction and will hopefully spur more housing building all across Virginia, from rural to urban to suburban. So a little bit of good news there that I think we'll get voted on again this afternoon. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Catherine and be happy to take your questions.
Sir, our first question is from Mitchell with WTOP.
Good afternoon, Senator. Thanks for joining us. And I know you're probably tired about talking about DNI, but I do have a question related to it. Senate Majority Leader Thune said today he has never been asked to slow down a nomination, but he is deferring to the White House on Jay Clayton. Given that Tulsi Gabbard is set to step down on Friday, what are your thoughts about the possibility that Bill Pulte could become the acting DNI, and is there anything that can be done to stop that?
Unfortunately, I think Bill Pulte will probably show up for work on Monday. And the only reason he's showing up is because Donald Trump decided to slow down a confirmation of his own appointee. It's mind-boggling. And again, there was so much bipartisan pushback about Pulte. Now, I imagine someone will file a lawsuit because Pulte does not have the minimum requirements of the law of national security background. But I am, again, so terrified of the damage that Mr. Pulte could do, either on purpose or just because he doesn't understand that you got to keep classified secret. And I am particularly concerned since we know that Donald Trump, we've talked about this in the past, Mitchell, we know Donald Trump still can't acknowledge the fact that he lost in 2020 and has said repeatedly that he thinks the feds ought to take over voting in certain areas. He thinks the only way that his team could lose this fall is if there's cheating. So I am terrified that Bill Pulte could fabricate a piece of intelligence or take a piece of intelligence and use that as an excuse to try to interfere in our elections, to call out troops, to call out ICE. And again, it's not my words you have to worry about. It's President Trump's words himself about saying all of this is on the table, and even some of his current DHS secretary, Markwayne Mullin, has not taken the possibility of sending ICE troops to the polls. So I am extraordinarily concerned about the damage Pulte could do to our national security. And we don't even know when Clayton will get to appear again so that we could move again on a nomination that Donald Trump put forward. Can't make this stuff up.
Sir, our next question is from Gabrielle with Nexstar.
Hey, Senator, thanks for taking the time. I have a question about the housing bills and how soon people at home can actually expect to feel an impact if this does go forward.
Well, if it goes forward, there's agreement now with the House. I think it has to repass the House again. But this should become law, I hope, before July 4th. The implementation, I hope we could start to see progress as early as this fall or into the winter. And again, in many communities, we have so many regulations to actually build a new house that we've got to increase the supply. Part of this is things like, could we convert old retail strip centers into housing? We have to think imaginatively. This notion of what's called modular housing, the idea of being able to build a house off-site and then move it to the location so that it's cheaper, quicker to get built. We still have requirements on what's called modular housing, that the houses have to have wheels on them if they fall into that category, the way we used to around trailer parks. So, this is a step forward. I don't want to overstress. It is mostly regulatory relief, but I do think we could start to see new home construction go up this fall, is what I'm hoping.
Senator, our next question is from Madison with 13 News Now.
Hi, thanks so much for the time. Also speaking about the housing package here, so given the last year and the uncertainty of what would happen to funding for organizations like HUD, do you think that this housing legislation maybe provides more security for them moving forward? And do you think that the bipartisanship there also speaks to the need for that?
Well, Madison, I wish I could tell you yes. This is more giving incentives to localities to build more housing. What it doesn't really address are the HUD sponsors programs, some of which have been very successful, like the low-income tax credit, which allows us to build oftentimes multifamily housing at a cheaper rate. Those programs are still under assault. Those programs were still cut dramatically by the big ugly bill that also cut health care. So, this is a process improvement. But the housing funds that we still need, we still have to argue about in the budget process. So I'm going to continue to support those programs. I want to continue to look at expanding the low-income tax credit so we can build more low-income housing. We also have to realize that, part of around the cost of housing is trying to keep interest rates low. But, we can't lower interest rates if we see huge inflation, and we're seeing inflation 4% over the last quarter rise because of Donald Trump's war of choice with Iran and driving up gas prices and driving up fertilizer and driving up costs that are delivered by diesel fuel. So all of these things are intertwined, but I do think we're still going to have to fight for the housing funds in the budget process.
Senator, our next question is from Mark with CBS 19.
Hey, Senator, thanks so much for your time. I just had a question. You supported Sammy's Law and other efforts online aimed at protecting children. And so, as summer rolls around and young people spend more time online, what do you see as the biggest safety challenges facing children today? And what do you think needs to be done to address them?
Well, two things. One, we need to pass, beyond Sammy's Law, comprehensive kids' online safety. And the tech companies, while they say they want to protect kids, fight this legislation tooth and nail. And, I'm part of that legislation. It's broadly bipartisan. I think we have over 70 sponsors, maybe over 90. And we got to get that done, number one. Number two, it's as scary as social media is to our kids. I think artificial intelligence is scarier. We've already seen court cases brought by families who've lost a young person to suicide because they were encouraged into suicide by a chatbot. That is outrageous, and we need to pass legislation that actually addresses the ability of these chatbots to drive our kids into mental health or into crises. We also have had promises repeatedly from the tech companies that they will not do what's called non-consensual nudes. You get a picture of a 12-year-old's face, and then you put an adult body nude on that with these AI tools. That's outrageous. And we get lip service from the tech companies, but we got to pass a law and hold them responsible and have them pay penalties, because otherwise, as bad as social media has been for our kids, AI could be worse. And this whole approach that sometimes the administration has had of, well, we don't want to put any guardrails anywhere on AI, will be a disaster. And I think they're even starting to come around, not only because of concerns about kids, but there was this new AI, I won't go down this whole path, but there was this new AI tool called Mythos that literally could break into every one of our classified systems, break into our banks, break into potentially our water systems. And we've got to have some level of mandatory testing before these new models are released, because this could get beyond the ability for humans to actually deal with some of the downsides. So extraordinarily important that we take a holistic look at AI, from kids to national security to job loss.
Senator, our next question is from Angela with the Hampton Roads Messenger.
Good afternoon, Senator. Thank you for taking my question. I actually have two questions. One is, with the anniversary of the nation coming up, and we find ourselves in type of democracy position that we're in right now. What do you think the reason is for that? Mm-hmm. And also, if you were able to recommend someone for National Security Director, who would you recommend?
Well, let me take the second one's easier. I would recommend someone who actually President Trump appointed in his first term, Paul Nakasone, who had been the head of our National Security Agency, which does a lot of the spying, listening in devices, and does the Cyber Command. I think he understands AI. I think he was a uniformed general. I have huge respect for him. I think he'd be a great choice. In terms of the state of our democracy, I worry. I worry about the potential for election interference. I worry about political partisans, frankly, on both sides that try to say that if people of the other party are the enemy. I worry that Donald Trump is trying to rewrite American history and, frankly, in many ways, erase the contributions of African Americans, of Latinos, of women. We in Virginia have got a checkered history on human rights and justice. We were the cradle of the Confederacy and capital of the Confederacy, and we were the state in 1954 in Prince Edward County that shut down schools rather than integrate. You can't whitewash those stories. And I believe you see even that the celebration of the 250th anniversary, at least that was going to take place in Washington, was going to celebrate the good, the bad, and the ugly of our country still striving forward. Unfortunately, Donald Trump has turned this into a political rally for himself. Most of the performers are not going to participate in a partisan event on our nation's birthday. So I, again, just, it's challenging at times. There are good news, though. Let me just answer the question with a little bit of more good news. This morning, Tim Kaine and I had all of the young men and women who've been accepted into our service academy, the West Point and the Naval Academy and the Merchant Marines and Air Force and Coast Guard. And to see these young people all just graduating high school and all literally going off to take an oath to defend our country in the next 10 days or so really gave me hope, because you see how many good young people that care deeply about our country. And I tell you, the group of young people I saw looked like the face of Virginia today, and that made me proud as well.
Senator, our next question is from Layla with WDBJ7.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for taking our questions. I just wanted to ask you if you were aware of and if you were okay making a comment on a missing Washington and Lee alumni who is lost in Peru. His family has been searching for him. They're from Lexington, Virginia, and I just was wondering if you were aware of this.
No, let me do this. Well. I mean, obviously, if somebody's lost in a foreign country, and Peru is, I've been to Peru, part of the Amazon River there. There are jungles there. I don't know what part of the country this individual is lost. I will have somebody try to reach out. We can sometimes, push the State Department to do more, but I am not familiar with the case. But I'll get my staff to reach out to either to you guys in Roanoke or to get some information to see if we can assist. I do know this: if the family's missing a loved one, my hearts go out to them, and if there's anything we can do or the United States government can do, we'll try to help.
Senator, next I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Lalit with the Press Trust of India. What are your thoughts on the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump a day earlier in France? Has it helped in improving the relationship between India and the U.S.?
Well, I've not gotten a readout of the meeting. I hope it will improve relations. And this is, again, a frustration. I am proud to be the co-chair of the India caucus in the Senate. I think ties between India and America are extraordinarily important. And, we in Virginia benefit from a very large Indian diaspora. And one of the things, again, that just is kind of crazy to me, for the last 25 years, we have tried to move India away from reliance on Russia and move more as a fellow democracy into alliance with us. We've started things like the Quad that would include India, Japan, Australia, and America. So it was beyond baffling to me that earlier or last year that for a while President Trump arbitrarily raised tariffs on India to some of the highest in the world. Now, we've been working to try to move India away from China, away from Russia, and all that did was drive India back to think, well, maybe partnering with America is not our best bet. So I'm going to try to get the readout on the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Trump, but this is, I think, one of the top 2 or 3 geopolitical relationships of the 21st century, and we need to strengthen this tie, not weaken it.
Senator, those are all the questions we have today.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Be safe.